And I think to build a great portfolio that will be resilient over time, the most important tool at your disposal is to really ask, what do I not know and what could transpire in the future? And then stress test your holdings against how different things might affect it. So not to be too affected by what the environment's been most recently, but to ask yourself what could happen, what might happen, and then how do I stress test against that and pick the most resilient portfolio. That was our sort of original idea that Ray Dalio had when he set up the all-weather portfolio many years ago. We've maintained that portfolio and built on it by really adding to the scale of tools that we have to stress test portfolios over time, to look at many different options that might occur, stress testing them in different geographies, thinking about what if you could only run a portfolio in one geography or another, and expanding the range of assets and ideas that you have to create that resilience over time. I don't think deglobalization is happening. I think it's just a rewiring of the globalization we do have. It's companies looking around saying, wait a minute, I don't want to be overly reliant on any one place. And I'm especially nervous about being overly reliant on China because I'm feeling the political pressure to diversify away from that and think about what geopolitical risks might arise. The big winners are going to be countries that can basically replace that. Places that maybe weren't the single best top destination to go, but now you need your second best, you need your third best, you need other options. China is so massive that no one place is going to be able to replace everything that China has done for global supply chains. And you're seeing different countries be able to compete to try to meet some of those roles. Mexico geographically is just in a great place to meet a lot of those roles. And India, is probably the best candidate to be able to take over some of the scale of what China's done, and for years has not had a great policy backdrop to enable that, and is certainly trying to take advantage of those opportunities. Now, it's still early days, and you don't know which of these countries will really be able to capitalize on it, but the size of the opportunity and the scope of financial and investment flows that are looking to move is massive, and you really see it in those early FDI flows, just soaring into those countries, trying to see what can be done. If you think about what does it take to move from where we are today to a net zero world, what you really need to do is in some way discourage people from creating emissions or using carbon and encourage them to do other things instead. You can take the stuff you don't want and make it expensive. Or you can take stuff you do like and make it more attractive. The classic economist favorite is definitely make the bad stuff expensive, right? Tax it. The market will find the most possible efficient way to get around those emissions. The problem with that has always been that it's extremely unpopular politically to take things that we use, like oil, and make them more expensive to use. Nobody likes that. And I think it became a lot more politically unpalatable as inflation rose the last few years, and especially, Russia invades Ukraine, we get these rises in energy prices in places like Europe. It's a massive shift in the world. Let's go and just incentivize all the good stuff. I think geopolitical competition with China was probably the thing that catapulted the US most in this direction, where the US could look and say, wait a minute, China spent a lot of government effort trying to be leaders in things like solar and EVs. And so the US with IRA and now Europe trying to follow suit are really shifting direction in terms of let's basically give lots of incentives to encourage all the things we want to see in a transition world. And the implications for investors are massive. I like to think of the stock market as a Venn diagram. Think about like one circle being the climate problem and one circle being the stock market. There's things in the climate problem that don't really affect you much as a stock market investor, but your exposure to that is minimal at best. And there's parts of the stock market that don't have a lot to do with the climate problem. In the middle, you have this sweet spot of companies that are actually really important to how the climate problem proceeds. What these companies do is really going to make a difference to whether or not we have impact. And so if you're running one of these companies, the policy landscape is quickly shifting to either disincentivize emissions or more often now actually give you great incentives to move towards different business models that can move us somewhere. And as an investor, that's a landscape that's greatly going to influence which companies can take advantage of it and who the winners and losers are going to be. We are definitely studying it deeply, and we see a lot of potential for AI to upend a lot of different industries. And so to make one comparison, the biggest shift you've had is really in manufacturing in the developed world. And you took probably 10% of the developed world workforce and shifted them out of manufacturing. either because those jobs went abroad to poor places or because there was a lot of automation. So today when you go to a factory floor in the United States, you see fewer workers, but those workers are highly productive, working along with machines to do incredible things. And that was maybe 10, maybe 15% of the economy. That feels small, and it was very gradual over many years, but obviously for a 30, 40-year period, this had enormous consequences, right? Huge political consequences, consequences for inequality, for corporate profitability, and so it mattered to investors hugely over a multi-decade time scale. When I look at AI in comparison, I think AI has the potential to be that, but actually at least 2 or 3 times greater. So when you look at different studies of what are the susceptibility of different jobs to, kind of being augmented in some way by AI, you don't look at 10% of the workforce, you look at more like 40 or 50, multiple magnitudes bigger. While the potential is huge, so far it's definitely kind of going in baby steps, as you'd expect. Not only does technology have to be ready, but you also need to have business processes. Today, you're starting to see green shoots of it in small industries, but not enough to affect the broader macro backdrop. So for example, if you look at something like call centers and customer service, right? They're going through something as big as we saw in the phase of kind of globalization previously. The number of jobs being lost is just as big as when all those jobs shifted to India, but instead they're shifting to machines. That said, the wages of those who are still doing those jobs are actually still going up and going up rapidly because they're competing with hotel workers and restaurant workers and all the places where you still have pressure on wages. In other words, if the industries kind of go one by one in small amounts, the broader inflationary backdrop is going to be much bigger than the small deflationary impact of the one place where you have AI really being integrated. My best bet is over the next year or two, the inflationary impacts are going to be significantly greater and drown out the more deflationary impacts and the productivity enhancement coming from AI. But as you look ahead on a longer time scale of 10, 20, 30 years, I wouldn't be surprised if we actually look back and say this is the biggest event that occurred, just like the automation and globalization in manufacturing sector was one of the most important events that happened in the last 40 years. Bridgewater has always had a co-CIO model because we always really deeply believed that in what we do, the most important ingredient to good decision-making is to actually get around the table multiple people who are deeply informed but have independent perspectives and can bring something else. Ray Dalio, our founder, often talked about playing jazz together. And what he meant was when you listen to jazz, every instrument brings something really different, and together the music is something one instrument on its own could never make. We want to create that in investing. We want at least 3 smart people that are deeply knowledgeable with the topic, with really independent perspective, bringing like their own musical instrument, if you will, such that what comes out is greater than what any one person can accomplish. So we've set up our structure this way, we've set up our investment committee this way, and we've built these very long, lasting relationships between myself, the other chief investment officers, and our senior investors to foster that kind of dialogue, disagreement, and ultimately working together to create something any one of us couldn't do on our own. Ray Dalio has succeeded in doing what very, very few people in the industry have ever succeeded doing, which is actually building a firm that could transition to the next generation without him. A lot of people have built iconic firms, not a lot. People have built iconic firms. Very few of them have managed to make them outlast that first iconic person that kind of put it together. And so I think it's an incredible accomplishment. And for all of us like myself, that Ray has been such a personal, incredible mentor to, Ray switching officially into a mentor role, it's a moment of celebration in some sense because it's on us now, right? Like this incredible, founder and visionary created this company and at the end has actually managed to transition it to us. And so while I've loved working at Bridgewater all the time I've been there, that moment of really taking full responsibility and being able to say, we're gonna be the people who move this company into the next generation beyond that first founder, beyond that first person that set it up. It's really exciting, and I think it was empowering and energizing to the whole group of people took over from Ray, and we're really excited to work together for the next few decades. When I joined Bridgewater in 2006, the world was very different. As an example, emerging markets were a smaller footprint in the global financial markets. We were pre-financial crisis, and so this was still sort of a heyday of leveraging up, and talking about debts was a little bit strange to people. And in the years since I've been there, we've massively expanded our research footprint and been able to keep up with incredible developments in the world and accelerate beyond them in order to keep our investment process humming. And so we've invested tremendously into machine learning and AI to keep up with technology needed to invest better. We've invested massively into studying new emerging markets where the markets grew and became a much larger share of what's available to investors than when I first joined the firm. In the last 15 years, we've done incredible work trying to map out the buyers and the sellers of really every asset and predict what they're going to do next. And the experience that's happened since I joined the firm of 10 years of quantitative easing, big financial flows that really pushed through and affected every market in a way that didn't exist as a real life case since the Great Depression. I've had an incredible journey at Bridgewater, and I think that I never would have had that journey without the deeply embedded firm culture that it's everyone's job to give feedback and teach the people around them, because everyone I encountered at every phase, no matter what their depth of expertise was, starting with the co-CIOs all the way to people I worked with on very specific things, took the time to teach, to explain, to ask tough questions, and to give real feedback, because you can't really move ahead in your career if someone is not pointing out to you the things you need to do to get to the next level. The most incredible mentors I had often saw things in me before I saw them myself and could kind of point me in a direction that, lay out a path that didn't come to me on my own. And to me, the most important thing is to do that for others. I have had a lot of people I've mentored in my time at Bridgewater, but probably the most meaningful to me have been the women I've mentored, because there are fewer senior women in the industry. And in many ways, it doesn't matter, right? I've had incredible mentorship from people from every background. But there's certain things that I know have struck a chord with people. Probably most important, being a mother and just making it crystal clear that really enjoying being a parent and really enjoying your job are two things that can go hand in hand and be, two parts of a whole that make a life and aren't in any way in conflict. That's meant a lot to me. Let me make a prediction for the next year or two that's not that commonly talked about, which is that I will say that currencies have been a totally ignored part of the investment landscape for a long time, because for quite a few years, it just didn't matter what you denominated your investments in. That's not true at all time, right? When you look at past cases, when you get more volatile inflation, when you get higher rates that are moving between countries, it can matter tremendous amounts whether or not you have currency exposure. My prediction is that we're moving back into that world, where you're gonna have much bigger differences between countries, more volatile inflation rates and interest rates, bigger current account shifts, and it's just not gonna be possible to be an investor and completely ignore the currency exposure question. It'll be too big of a driver of your actual ultimate returns.